Museums Victoria respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands where we work, the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and First Peoples language groups and communities across Victoria and Australia. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and their emerging leaders. Our organisation, in partnership with the First Peoples of Victoria, is working to place First Peoples living cultures and histories at the core of our practice.
Good evening and welcome to Melbourne Museum. My name's Dermot Henry. I'm the head of the Sciences Department here at Museums Victoria, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight to this very special Futures Forum, and also a big warm welcome to those joining us online this evening. On behalf of our speakers tonight, I acknowledge the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which we work and where we're gathered this evening. I pay respects to their ancestors and to all elders and First Nations people who have joined us this evening. Welcome. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge Gabriel, who's providing the Auslan interpretation for tonight's program, so thank you, Gabriel. Tonight's event is part of Museums Victoria's Future Forums, and tonight it's Ideas Shaping Tomorrow, a series of conversations proudly presented by Museums Victoria that brings together the world's brightest innovators and creative thinkers to reflect on the big ideas and important questions that shape our future. Tonight's program is proudly presented as part of Melbourne Museum's Design Week Hub, Design for Future Human Health. This is the topic, exploring the role of contemporary design in the future of health and medical technology. And for more than 165 years, Museums Victoria has conducted research and which has been inspired by our collections, and we have inspired inquiry, creating new knowledge that shapes our understanding of our past and present and future. So Museums Victoria is thrilled tonight to bring together industry, design, education and public audiences in support of medtech as a key area of growth within Victoria. The presentation of this program has been made possible through the incredible support of Creative Victoria, Melbourne Design Week, the National Gallery of Victoria and the Australian MedTech Manufacturing Centre. A second discussion for the evening, Design and Innovation for Future Human Health, brings together industry experts working at the intersections of design, technology and healthcare to explore the future of human health and the role design plays in helping us live longer and healthier lives. So thank you for coming, and it's my great pleasure to welcome back our host for tonight, CEO of BioMelbourne Network, Jeff Malone, who will now introduce the panellists. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for that. So it's great to be here, and welcome to the second part of our discussion this evening on design and innovation for future human health. So my name again is Jeff Malone. I'm the CEO of BioMelbourne Network. We have been the peak body for the health tech industry, representing Victoria for over 22 years, and we help bring together government, researchers in universities, SMEs, with the investors and the product developers and the other people they need to translate that innovation or research and commercialize it into something that can actually have impact to human health, right? Not only here in Australia, but pretty exclusively all of our companies are aiming at global markets. So what we're going to hear about, so in our earlier session, we peered through the window into the world where we all kind of live in, that has a whole ecosystem of globally recognized folks throughout Victoria and Australia, centered on health tech research and innovation commercialization. So join me now as we take a deeper dive into the critical role that design plays in actually translating medical technology and innovation into real products that have impact on human health. The translation journey requires a strong foundation of good design that is well aligned to the needs of industry to ensure the outcome that we all desire. So what does that really mean? What role does truly product design and development take in that translation journey? And before we get into that, I think I want to give a little more context to some of the technology that's out there. And although we're not going to go do a deep dive into individual bits of technology, we're going to really talk about the design, the general impact of design on product translation. There are so many breakthroughs happening in the ecosystem and in the world right now that it's phenomenal. You know, there's artificial intelligence that we've all been hearing about, and while we all and our high school children may be all trying to get on ChatGPT to use that for less or more nefarious purposes, artificial intelligence also designs new drugs. It screens for cancer and can analyze vast amounts of data that humans could never do and give us results that are used to improve diagnosis and treatment. There are machine brain interfaces that allow physically disabled to communicate, to work and engage in ways that would have been the stuff of science fiction only a decade ago. Wearable medical technologies that automatically monitor and dose insulin for diabetics. There will be a lot of people in this room that have one of those devices or know someone in their family who does. Again, that was not a thing 10 years ago, really, or it was very early. And advanced robotics, things that, surgical robotics that interact with MRI machines so that when they detect cancer in your brain, the robotics can actually detect where that is during surgery and remove it directly. So there's no, to be a bit gruesome, feeling around. So those are just a few examples of the incredible technology and advancements that are in front of us that one day will make up our new future normal and what we expect as the minimum standard of care. So as an example, when the first cardiac pacemaker was developed, which, by the way, was right here in Australia in 1928 by Dr. Mark Cowley-Lidwell. So he used a car battery and a device to deliver a series of shocks to and save the first patient ever with a device that was a newborn in 1928. Now, from that point, and they did save that newborn's life. From that point, the size of the machinery and the complexity of it and the unreliability of the design meant that the first actual implantable medical device was not put into a patient until it was 1958 in Sweden. That device failed in 6 hours. That patient survived and went on during the course of his lifetime to have 26 different pacemakers installed in that, and survived and lived a long life. Today, there are millions of these devices out in the world, right? And again, there'll be people in this room, there'll be people that you know who have one of these. So the technology was there, but the design was not, right? And sort of, for those in the room, raise your hand if you think that level, if you want to be at that point of the sharp end of the product development life cycle where you'll have a implantable device put into you 26 times over your life. It's just not acceptable anymore. So the window has shifted dramatically since that time of what's acceptable. And so not only do we require now cost and quality and reliability, but now in the age of mobile phones and apps and instant access to data and really empowering patient agency, the standard of what now constitutes a good product is an ever-evolving and quickly evolving entity. So join me now in welcoming presentations for our speakers this evening who will provide insights into the question of and the perspective from an organization who has helped develop a wide-ranging series of cutting-edge medical devices over the years, which is D&I, and from a company who actually is on their own journey, right, which is Synchron. And so who I've got here today with me is Gary Haywood, and Gary is the business development manager for Design and Industry, who's probably the leading product industrial design medical device design company in Australia, I would say. You're not going to disagree.
I'll go with that, Jeff. You've won me on that.
I'm going to say yes. Nicholas Opie, Chief Technology Officer, Synchron, and Professor of Vascular Bionics, Vascular Bionics Laboratory at the University of Melbourne. And so I think we're going to start off with Gary, who's going to introduce DNI and a little about his experience with this journey.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and thanks for the opportunity. DNI is a 35-year-old company now. We total a staff of around 80 designers, engineers, electronics and software firmware resources. We've 3 studios, one here in Melbourne, in Sydney and in Newcastle. And our client base is global. So probably 40% of our work is done for clients in North America, Europe, and through Southeast Asia, Singapore. And some of those relationships that we've enjoyed are very long. We've had them for several decades, working with companies and clients in both North America and in Europe. We've been very fortunate. So there's obviously something that we're doing right, and the company continues to grow at the moment, particularly in the medical device space. It's a really wonderful market for growth for us at the moment, and as well as capability improvement within the organisation, our growth is really in export as much as we can. The local market is still a very important market for us, but definitely in exporting of those design services and bringing our capabilities up to speed to match that demand as we'd like to see it.
Great, and as you'll see in the background, you'll see a range of different products being shown here that a lot of them that DNI have developed over the years. And a quick insight: I used to work with DNI, and what I always found fascinating was that you've got the same group of design engineers, electronics, and other people there who are designing the next generation keyboard and devices like you see behind you that are 3D printing
tissue printing at the end of the day. For
3D tissue printing. So
it's one of the things that as you rightly pointed out is that every project that we do at the end of the day is new, and particularly the projects that we seem to attract, and they are certainly coming out of here in Victoria. It's always cutting-edge technology that tends to be the driver, whether it's coming out of a university or a research institute. It's never the same. So, yeah, you find every project that we do, it's a very steep learning curve. We work with CSIRO and a lot of those key institutions to ultimately commercialise a lot of their technical innovations.
Now, before I go on, I need to make sure that I remind everyone that's here and also online that we are taking audience questions this evening using the online Q&A platform Slido. So please don't hesitate to join the conversation to submit a question. Go to slido.com, slido.com, using your mobile phone or other device and enter the code #innovation2205. So, Nick, over to you.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks for having me here. It's great to see you guys here, and welcome to those online. Do get your questions in. I mean, I think the reason we're both here is to answer some questions you have. I know Synchron certainly, we're where we are because of some novel design. We're a brain-machine interface company. We're developing a technology that can allow people with paralysis to control external equipment like keyboards and phones to allow them to communicate with their loved ones and carers and community. For us, design is the reason that Synchron's one of the leading neurotechnology companies in the world, and we're not the first. Other people have tried this before, and other people have previously been trying to access the brain by using saws or drills to remove the skull, and then by using electrodes that look like nails and sort of shooting them into the brain tissue to record signals from people with paralysis to allow them to control technology. Now, the science behind it has shown that it works. People can, even if they can't move their limbs, they can use their brains in a similar way to before the injury or accident and produce the neural signals for moving limbs. And these invasive devices showed that was the case. But none of these devices have been given FDA clearance. And part of the reason is that these patients sit there with large wires hanging out of their heads that are connected to keyboards and computers, and you can't use that at home. You can't, from a medical perspective, allow someone to have that go into their native environment. There's huge risks of infection and bleeding, among other things. And so with our technology, by not having to remove the skull, doing a design that allowed people to have the same ability to use their brains, but without the surgery. I mean, I think that's the reason why we've been granted FDA approval, and why we're hopefully going to be one of the first to market with a technology that can help a lot of people.
Great. So I think we do have a range of questions coming in, and once again, feel free to keep those coming. One of the things that I did want to touch on, and you were talking about the different technologies of, now that you look at it and you say, well, was it ever really a viable product where you had big nails and wires hanging out of your head? But the technology, the principle of how that works, how much different is that from what you're doing in Synchron?
I think whether it remains to be viable will be seen over the coming years. There are
I meant the nails.
Very
and
rich
sticking out of your head.
individuals
Yeah,
who
yeah.
are doing that. So let's see how they go. But certainly for us, we wanted to make sure that the procedure was safe for the patients. We wanted to take advantage of other fields. So cardiac medicine is one field that's been going along a lot longer than vascular devices, and for them, stents are placed inside blood vessels. So we were able to take advantage of the lessons they've learnt and the skills that they have, and go, okay, well, there are blood vessels in the head as well as the rest of the body. Why don't we use those as a way to get into the brain, but without doing the surgery that has a lot of risks? And I think that's sort of one of the designs that we came up with, and one of the ones that has been able to fast track us through the clinical pathway.
So what other elements are there? So you've got the brain interface. You took some inspiration from some other products that were out there that solve some of the problems with the, to be not too delicate, nails sticking out of the head problem. But that's not your whole product. What is when you look at your product, it's more than just the technology that makes it successful, and that's a little bit about the theory we're talking about today. What makes your product a product, not just the sensor or the machine-brain interface?
I think there's a number of things. So there's the technology is one part of it. The product also, in terms of design, we also have to be careful in designing clinical trials. We have to design a technology that actually makes sense for the people we're making it for. And there's huge teams around us that you need in medicine, engineering, biology, all of that. And certainly, I think when you're looking at design, as an engineer, when I started this project, right, I was thinking, well, they've got these amazing prosthetic arms that are arguably better than ours, made of carbon fibre, never get tired, extremely strong. Why don't we connect everyone to them? That's what they're going to love. And I think it took a little while for me as an engineer to understand that maybe the people that we're making it for don't have the same needs that I, as an engineer, want to sort of provide them. So certainly for us, and the more we started spending time with the end users or the customers or in this case the patients, we started realising what they really want is to be able to communicate again. They, having this amazing arm sounds cool, and I love the idea, and I'm sure we'll get there, but for them, they just wanted to speak to their families. And so for us, there was a design change in what's the software we can provide them that will allow them to connect to not only what's available today or yesterday in terms of phones and iPads, but how can we make sure that it's somewhat foolproof for what comes next. And I don't know where the technology is going to go, but certainly being able to connect people to smart devices like phones and homes has been exactly what they've wanted, and we're lucky that they've been able to tell us that, as opposed to going down my pathway of just making cool arms and limbs and things that perhaps they wouldn't want.
So Gary, picking up on the idea of the difference between technology and good product design, I realize I'm opening up a can of worms here, but can you give us a little bit on your experience that you see coming out of universities or startups or others in that innovation space, and the product that's on the screen is probably a good example as any, but you can take that question from there.
It's like Nick said, that we often find with the founders of the companies, if they're, for instance, they're startups and doing it for the first time, and sometimes even if they're a company that's coming from a space that's been very successful from technology and technology-driven innovation, as designers, we've got a responsibility, and it's in our DNA to actually try and unpack, to some degree, a lot of that that very scientific technology approach and bring that human factors element into the conversation. It's not always seamless. We don't always do that successfully, but the real trick at the end of the day is, as designers, is to actually really start bringing the imperative of those needs further up the priority list, if you like. And it's the same when it flows on into the regulatory environment and the compliance within human factors in a very controlled regulatory environment. A lot of that, those parameters are still very much a part of that process as well too. So as a designer, that's probably our biggest challenge initially, is to really convert sometimes many years of research, technology research, into thinking around a user experience, to some degree a market need, and some of the parameters around that, and actually really getting the thinking around what they're really trying to do without it being a detrimental thing at the end of the day. But so if we can actually successfully do that, we get a very powerful basis to actually go forward into technology development, because they've got those insights actually driving their decision making at the end of the day. And we can always come back to the storytelling of the user experience, the workflows, user demographics, and what certain clinicians or health staff might prefer, and also what you're trying to do with the technology. So they may have a very well-entrenched means or process of conducting a certain type of surgery or conducting a certain type of treatment. And what you're trying to do through your new innovation is change that. And you have to be very mindful of how much you can achieve in actually doing that. So sometimes we actually have to pare back the degree of innovation on the basis of what the users ultimately can really tolerate in a change process of actually bringing that treatment safely and successfully to market. So it's very important to us. That very early stage is a very fundamental foundation period for us to then get into the very serious technology development.
I find it really surprising how many people you have to design it for, right? So you design it for the end user, but there's also different design considerations for the surgeons or whoever's implanting it. Then there's, like you're saying, design considerations to make it safe for the FDA. There are considerations for reimbursement, and I think a lot of startups just think they're making it for the patient and the end user. But as you go along the journey and get more experience, you realise that there are more design people. There are more people that have input into what you need, and you need to make it agree with a whole lot of different
they're very much
faculties
so.
and fields.
Yeah. And there's a degree of very early in the piece of how much you can make it as an assumption and work as the basis of the decision making or the early decision making, and then how you go through to some degree a controlled process of actually just validating those assumptions, so that at the end of the day you're right, or you're correcting the pathway on the basis of what you're learning through the development process as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, whenever I've been involved in those programs, we always talk about the user. You're designing for the user, the chooser, and the buyer. And they may have very different design requirements. You might have a user who's the patient, and they want a certain outcome. They want a certain features in the arm. You might have a chooser. That might be the hospital. That might be the healthcare provider. It might be different folks who in different countries who choose that. And then who's buying it? Who's actually going to be paying money for that? And product designs do change depending on who's buying it and where you're selling that product. So all of those become complicating factors. Nick, in your own journey, when you look back over the product design, you kind of hinted at you may have started a more engineering-centered approach and then moved towards, two questions, and then we've got some coming from Slido as well. One, how long is that process from when you first have that sort of idea till where you are now, and how much longer do you think it's going to be to get yourself into into public use?
It takes a while. We've been going for about 10 years now. So when we started up, we didn't have anything. We didn't have a lab. We didn't have people. We had an idea, and then so certainly we started from zero. So we've been going for 10 years now. The first number of years were designing the device, making iterations. We knew what we wanted to achieve. We knew we wanted to get a device through blood vessels, but how do you do that? How do you do the engineering work to show that that's feasible? And I suppose the next stage is going into, well, how can we make this product and prove that it's safe for an early clinical trial? And certainly Australia continues to be, and Victoria continues to be the best place, in my opinion, to do those. And then after that, depending on where your market is, for us, the US is a much larger market for people with severe paralysis. So that's where we're now doing trials, and hopefully when we finish these in say 4 or 5 years, then we'll be market ready for those that are prescribed it by their physicians. But it's a long journey, but I think we continue to learn, and like you've said, you continue to know where to do designs. It does help to have the right base and the right idea at the start, and then you can sort of make small iterations and improvements, as opposed to do big flips if you got that wrong. But certainly we were lucky that we chose the right avenue at the start, and have continually just optimised it and keep making it better based on who the user or payer is, or the other people involved in the decision-making process.
Right, thank you. So I've got a question that's coming from Slido for Gary, and both of you can jump in. But we kind of heard a little bit about yours, Nick, and Gary, in your experience, what's the origin of a lot of these projects? Are they coming straight from health experts? Are they coming from researchers, health professionals? Where are a lot of these startups originating out of?
Yes, all of the above. Yeah, the health, the medtech space, which is largely driven by startups. In our experience, most of the clients that we see are developing a product for the first time. There's clearly, a good deal of work going on out there with existing original equipment manufacturers. They tend to do a lot of that control and technology development internally, and we might supplement that. But most of the work that we actually see are people that are doing it for the first time. So there's a very steep learning curve that they're on, and most of them are coming out of institutions such as research institutes, universities, postgraduate researchers that are forming. Increasingly, courtesy of the government, there's a lot of accelerators that are starting to get really proficient at helping those early stage developers and founders for the first time, getting to a level of knowledge and proficiency and even resolution of their technology that's really helpful for organisations like us and the broader ecosystem to sort of filter out the better quality, if you like. Better quality teams. A very important thing is the backbone of the team. And it's usually made up of several people, technical, business, industry-based or advisors, and they'll come to us. Probably the tougher ones are when we get specialists or surgeons and clinicians that have an itching desire to see their product that's going to change their own procedure or profession for the better. They'll often come on their own, and they'll have a range of colleagues that they'll work with that they may have as advisors, and they're probably not as well resourced from a team perspective. But we often find a great many of the most successful products, and a lot of the ones that you see on display here, have ultimately been forged through teams of people that have come together and have gone through the journey and evolved together. And the team has grown over time to get a raft of advisors and support these initiatives, these accelerator initiatives that we find as our source.
Do you find that the mindset has changed? I know when I was starting out, it seemed to be you either go into academia or you go into industry, and there's sort of, you have to choose. Where I've found recently a lot of the graduates and people coming through have a mindset where it's okay to like turn your product into something that's actually going to break out of sort of conventional academia and turn into a product. I don't know if that's just me growing up, but has that been changing?
It's absolutely the truth. And there's a raft of drivers, I think, that are probably making that transition both successful and probably a lot more frequent than it has been in many years till now. I think that there's an innate curiosity amongst a lot of those stakeholders that, what if I could actually develop something that could make a difference other than a research paper? And I think once you trigger that curiosity and you start engaging with them on that level, they're absolutely just incredibly keen to know more. And so provided you actually understand the challenges of people that have been probably very research or academically focused for a long period of time, they're an incredible resource to get on board. But this is where the teams actually do start coming together, where you've got people that are working together and they're possibly different personalities, but we find the actual ecosystem is far more receptive now to conversations about a commercial outcome here and making a quid at some stage, as opposed to just turning your science into something that people can use.
So Nick, the conversations I've had there, that has been for many years the elephant in the room that says, I'm an academic researcher, I'm doing my research, you publish or perish kind of way of living and moving from grant to grant that are often only a year or two or very short funding periods, and you're constantly out chasing the next grant and writing your next paper. You stop that process to do a startup, which is risky, and you could fail, and you statistically you're going to, and then if you think you can't go back, you're not going to do that in the first place. And so that is starting to shift. And depending on who you talk to, you hear no, that's the past. Anecdotally, maybe not, but it is shifting. It is shifting, but it's got to continue. We got to build momentum to really make that transition, that back and forth between academia and industry sort of more fluid.
Look, and I might add too, broaching the amount of money that it costs to get a medical device to market and the amount of time, effort and commitment that it's going to take is always something that has to be judged very carefully. If we were to just drop some of the numbers and the amount of time and life that founders were going to commit to the process, probably a great many of them would say, I might leave it and park it for now, because it is a incredibly long and arduous journey, and it can be very expensive. So we always again try to get an idea of how we can successfully broach that, because again, being an educational process, we find that over a period of time, the amount of zeros don't worry founders once they've become accustomed to what they're doing, what the tasks are in front of them, and all of a sudden it just falls, the pieces of the puzzle just fall in behind that as we start working them through that process.
Yeah, I mean, it is long, you're right. I don't want to turn anyone off though. I mean, it's been an amazing process along the way, and I certainly wouldn't change anything. I didn't expect it would take this long when we started the company up. That's true, but I wouldn't change anything. I think just learning about how long it takes keeps you excited. There's new challenges all the time, so don't be turned off by the timing. That's just part of it, and you'll learn to love it. So if you're on the cusp and worried about how long it's going to take, don't worry about it. Like, you look back and years have flown by, and you're still loving it, and glad you did it.
There is a Stockholm syndrome element to it. You're taken prisoner, and at the first you fight it, and then eventually you just sort of succumb to it, and you think, oh, actually, this is pretty good. I'll stick around. So we've got some Slido questions coming in, and there's I'll say two basic categories coming in. So if you're online or if you're in the room and you have Slido, go ahead and put your questions in. So the two categories are really first around operating in Victoria and the benefits and the challenges of doing that. And the second is really we've definitely got some engineers and some young product designers in the room, and they've got some questions. So I think we're going to start with Victoria and sort of what are the advantages. I'll start with you, Nick. What are the advantages or disadvantages of actually starting a company here in Victoria?
I think some of the main advantages, the big ones, are the people in infrastructure. So for us and for people doing medical devices, having access to world-class universities within a couple hundred metres of animal facilities if you need them, or hospitals, and having all that wrapped together makes it so easy to get the right people in the room to design and test and build. I don't think you can do that in many other places, and certainly the encouragement of the people around to support the translation of technology from sort of concepts to clinic is amazing, and the government obviously is putting a lot into that as different universities and research institutes, and trying to streamline the pathway from getting the technology ready to showing that it works or is safe in humans is unparalleled so far, I think. So elsewhere in the globe, and I think that's an amazing place to start the journey.
We work in many jurisdictions and across many states, and there's a degree of local interest in various bodies, be it associations, private or government, in trying to localise talent improvement. We find it particularly in offshore markets as well. Having said that, though, underneath that there's an underlying motivation and belief that we're building global businesses here, so we can't afford to be too local and parochial about it. So we're finding that a lot of those jurisdictions now are very much open to getting the best for the project, best for the founders, and ultimately the best for the ecosystem. Look, the governments are particularly supportive of the sector, and at the moment it's probably as good as it's ever been on that front. And they're always willing to talk to the sector and try and make sure that they're framing up programs to help. And that's directly through grants and subsidies and various other things, and the R&D tax incentive as an example, but also through supporting a lot of these programs such as accelerators and educational programs that are bringing on through. So certainly Victoria's very strong in that at the moment. They've really been supportive over a long period of time. I think also too that Victoria, as well as having that ecosystem that Nick was talking about of the medtech development ecosystem in clinical trials, etc., is that they've also got a very strong desire to try and build up that manufacturing capability as a long-term value-adding process as well, and try to maintain that here. It's a difficult ask in the market, but of course it goes a long way to seeing some of those companies, and I think you saw some of them earlier tonight as well too, that are actually going that full hog of developing products here locally and then taking them to the world. So the governments are very much, amongst all of that. If you were to look deeply, you'd probably find them everywhere. So I think that that presence is incredibly important, particularly as we trial down the path and increasingly try to get private investment into the sector. And that's the biggest challenge that we have over the next 5 to 10 years, is making the sector, I guess, irresistible to the private money and actually having it coming in.
Yeah, I think a couple of comments on that is, one, Australia, we're well known for digging up iron ore and minerals and things and sending it overseas. Well, and where it gets converted into products and then sold back to us, right? If we continue to do that with our research and innovation, for every manufacturing job that exists, there are 7 peripheral jobs. We'll get 100 or 1,000 times in return on the investment in our research and innovation over what we do today by converting those products and be able to manufacture here. And while you're not going to make iPhones or the little birthday cards that sing to you when you open, don't think we're going to make those. There is a sweet spot where manufacturing here not only makes sense, but it's happening here every day, right? And I don't think people always realize that. The other part is, and without revealing too much, how much of the product development business that's here in Australia is actually from overseas clients who see how strong our design and development ecosystem is, and they want a part of it, whether it's from Asia or Europe or the US.
Look, I mean, you know the answer to this, Jeff, because you were very much a part of it. But at the end of the day, Australia is a very competent and a very safe area to invest your knowledge and to some degree your money in. So there's a high degree of trust with the Australian ecosystem that makes it a really useful place for potentially springboarding into global markets in the US or into Europe or even larger markets in Asia. So we find that that's a big part of actually, some of these offshore companies actually talking to us, is that there's a very high degree of trust in the Australian economy and the companies that they work with here. And I don't think that that's going to change in the near future. There's clearly various areas of unrest, if you like, in the region that sort of makes people a little bit nervous about certain jurisdictions. And Jeff mentioned the localisation of manufacturing. We're seeing the start of that. We'd probably like to see more of it with onshoring and sovereign capability development. But at the moment, the commercial drivers are still quite strong, fighting against that. But definitely, we're seeing, as Jeff was suggesting, that there's that degree of capability and trust in the local market where you can invest precious IP of your company into that market, and you're in it. You can be in it for the long haul. You don't feel like you can only do it for a short period of time and then, you've got to get out or you've got to ship offshore and go overseas to America and set yourself up there. So I would say that's probably important.
Thank you. So I think we're going to shift over in our last set of questions here. We've got definitely got some product, some emerging product developers and engineers in the room, and we're going to address some of their questions. So it says, in the medical device industry, is demand for engineering consultancy outpacing the supply? For engineering consultancies like yourselves, and Hydrix is in the room, hello, we've got some others around, is the demand for those consultancies outpacing the supply? Are you growing? Are you shrinking? Are you finding the people that you need?
Look, consulting's always a bumpy road. I mean, it always has been, as long as I've been in it for 35 years. I think probably that is going on. I mean, it's very, I guess, to some degree down to the companies themselves as to their business development activities, their marketing activities. We've always been very active on business development and marketing of the company. And changing the company to suit the demands of the market. You know, the work that we've managed to attract from overseas has been a combination of strategically going out there and pursuing it with a degree of confidence that we could do it, but also to some degree lucky that they saw our work. We were involved in international design competitions, for instance, and successful. And that was enough to actually attract them to come and talk to us as well too. So we'd like to think that export offering was continuing to grow. It has been growing over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. And we'd like to, obviously, we've initiatives in place to try and see that grow. It just takes away that reliance on the local pie and the usual competitive nature of it. And clearly, I think some of the initiatives that are underway at the moment with the government and the industries in general, the medtech industry in general, through universities and the institutes, that we're going to see increased numbers of better quality companies coming through that pipeline. And I think that certainly, bathes the industry in a good position to actually service that at the end of the day. So I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily a given that there's great years ahead. There's still a lot of work involved in it, but certainly I'd see that those factors are going to see it expand.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've seen that companies that I'm talking to are significantly expanding in the space, and for all the reasons we've talked about, not only for what's happening here in Victoria and Australia, but also demand from overseas.
There certainly seem to be a lot more jobs in medtech or med devices in Victoria than there were today than there were, say, when I finished, and I think that's continuing to grow. So I don't think the first port of call for a lot of finishing students now is to look overseas and see what's there. I think there's plenty of opportunities here in the backyard that they can look at first, and certainly it's got to the point where we're trying to get people from overseas because we need more people and need the ones with the right skills and qualifications, which a lot of graduates have.
So you've queued up the next question perfectly.
Oh, very good, very good.
Inadvertently, but well done. So what suggestions do you have for young product designers and or engineers or others who want to break into that healthcare design field?
I think one of the first things to do, or the best things, is to find out what's out there. So coming to events like this where you get to see different companies and what they're involved in, going to other sessions to just really find out what is available in Australia, and I think you'll be surprised. I'm always surprised when I come to these to see more technologies and companies that I didn't know before coming. So I think looking at that to start with, and I'd be surprised if you didn't find something that interested you here, and then it's a matter of just speaking to them and finding out what they do and seeing whether you're suitable for that role or position. But
So Gary, in your experience, not only with D&I but others in the design field here, and I'm going to broaden it besides industrial design, I'm going to put it into electronics and mechanical design and all this. Are companies only hiring highly advanced, highly experienced people, or are they developing people as well?
Put me on the spot, Jeff. With
I
that
know,
one, didn't
I know.
you?
Hey,
Yeah.
we're here for the tough questions, folks. We're not making it right.
Look, it's definitely there's a need for you to be, I suppose, well informed, not necessarily well qualified, but there's a lot to learn in the product design space, and that first 5 years of involvement in a consultancy or in a startup, as an example, are an incredibly steep learning curve from a designer's perspective. I'd imagine it's probably similar in other areas of design as well too, because those creative industries often are seeking out people that have got that first 5 years under their belt, that there's quite a bit of demand for that, but it's a bit tighter for those first 5 years. If you can fill that time learning, and some designers might go offshore and learn within Southeast Asia, quite a few do, go to Europe or go to North America and cut their teeth there, and some come back with that 5 years under their belt. Some may go into industry, some might work directly for industry, and again, some may start their own startup and learn that way as well too. So there's a raft of different options that are out there for young designers to cut their teeth now. But look, it is to some degree true that there's we're a bit spoilt for choice when it comes to recruitment. We always bring in interns and that sort of thing, but the reality is as well too is that the types of markets and businesses you do need to know as a designer. You do need to know quite a deal about those markets and some of the specialised elements of those markets, like medtech. You do need to have a good background in that to really be, if you like, beneficial to a studio.
I think, my own journey was as an electrical engineer and mechanical engineer, starting out designing washing machine motors. Then I went on to dryer motors, and then I went on from there to pumps and compressors, and then went on from there to which one of them was a medical device, and I started to learn about that, and eventually I went on to design lipstick cases, and then I went to route buses, and then I went to defense, and then but what you're doing is you're developing your skill set. It's all transferable. Electronics are going to have different parameters, but they're electronics. Mechanical design and materials choices and other things, you're building your experience. Don't think you have to start off designing the next machine-brain interface, right? You don't start there. You're going to start off building your skill set. So even if you want to get into healthcare design, you don't have to start exactly there. You can start anywhere. If I can go from designing lipsticks to route buses to over-the-horizon radar systems to medical devices, it just proves the transferability of those kind of skills.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. It's certainly, I think as well, a lot of skills can be taught on the job, so you don't have to be perfect in the job you're going for, but I think having the right attitude of saying I'm here to learn, here to expand my knowledge and bring the knowledge that you've already got is always going to be helpful.
Yeah, and I think two pieces of advice. One, start with something, just get started, and start building experience. And two, and this is something that I find for almost all researchers or STEM graduates, et cetera, learn how to network. And that's not just because I work for BioMelbourne Network. Learn how to network. It is a skill in and of itself, separate to your engineering skill, but is and that is sort of epitomized by the fact that I have ever only found one job in my life online, and the rest of them I've found through my own network, and most jobs aren't ever advertised, and so you really need to learn to network, and it seems unfair, but it's also you want to hire people you like, you want to hire people you know, and that networking really gets you in there. So
and I'd also just add to, particularly for the younger ones, you need physical networking, not online social media networking, as
Yes.
effective as it is.
Yes.
There's nothing like actually pressing the flesh and meeting people in person.
no amount of TikTok dances are going to get you there. So with that, one last quick question to both of you. If you're talking to your for yourself, Nick, if you're talking to yourself when you started this whole process, what would be your main piece of advice?
Actually, a few years ago, I sent myself a postcard that I'd receive a few years in the future to look back and make sure that I was on track. And it was quite simple. It was to tell myself to remind myself who I was doing this for. And I think it was important to do that. And that can change, right? You might be doing it for your family or your friends or the people you're making the technology for. But I think the advice I'd give myself is sort of the same. Just make sure you continually check back in with yourself that you're doing what's honest to you, that you're still enjoying it, still loving it, and if you are, then you're gonna have a much better chance of succeeding, and your products are going to be better, and you'll have a better time doing it. So I think making sure that you're honest with yourself. I suppose that doesn't really help my early self because nothing would have changed. But I like the idea that I've been able to check up on that, and I think that's important.
At least align yourself to where you were when you started the whole process.
That's right. Yeah.
No, keep the reason for getting it going, because it does take a huge amount of commitment, and sometimes along the way you can lose that sort of alignment.
Yeah, and I think we've been lucky. You've got to surround yourself, like you've mentioned, by really good people that will help you get through the difficult times, of which there are going to be many. You want them because that's how you can grow and get better. But as long as you've got a good network of friends or colleagues around you, then you can overcome anything. So I think that's really important. So if you're looking for a job, you need to interview them as much as they're interviewing you, and make sure that's a place that you want to go.
Great. And from a D&I perspective, from your perspective, with all the researchers and SMEs that are coming in to your doors, what is the main piece of advice that you feel like they should try and keep in mind when they come into your door?
That's a tough question. I was actually practicing the one you gave him. But
You can do that one as well. We can do that one as well. Go for it. No, go for it. We're infinitely flexible around here.
Yeah, look, I guess we definitely see younger founders and developers probably having a much higher degree of design mentality, aesthetic, and knowledge. We generally find some of the older demographic, and I'm sorry to sound very ageist, but I'm amongst them, that it takes a little bit longer for them to actually start feeling around the whole idea of actually developing a very strong design aesthetic around their business approach and being far less, I guess, structured and conservative to some degree. So certainly, I would be saying to a lot of those senior managers that are, in that decision-making process, just open yourself up to it a lot more and actually start trying to read a bit more of the room around design. Don't just see it as an aesthetic or an add-on that you do to your business processes. Actually really try to understand a little bit more about the value that it does bring, because it's been proven time and time again with studies and various other programs that it adds value to a business far more than a lot of management actually do appreciate. So we're seeing it. We're seeing startups coming through with a very strong aesthetic, and look, it's a hard road for them, but they're succeeding, and their design knowledge and appreciation is we see far more advanced, and they're leveraging off it. And I'd like to see probably a lot more of that appreciation in some of the more senior managers that I've dealt with over many years.
Well, thank you. I think we're just about wrapped up here, but I think looking back on the conversation, we've kind of started off in really understanding the translation of technology and the expectations of design and the role of design in translating technology into a true product, and we really then got into the whole aspect of not just what does the design need, but what are the factors that go into that, internal and external, users, choosers, buyers, and how does it fit in with all of your design strategy. Went on from there to look at really the role Victoria plays in supporting this ecosystem here, which I think is very significant. And not only because I'm BioMelbourne Network, but because I work with states around the country, there is not another state that comes within a country mile of the support that Victoria provides to the ecosystem here, and that has to be noted, because it's glaringly obvious once you sit in the in the space that we're in, and a little touch on advice for some of the young designers who might be watching or in the room or online today. A little schmettering of career advice, I think, was to sort of a cherry on the cake. So. So I'd like to thank one more time Gary and Nick for their time and in preparing for today, and also to come here and talk to all of us about their experience in medical product design and the importance of design in that journey. And I'm just going to wrap up here. We've got. We do have a survey that's going to be coming out by email. So if you do fill in the survey, you're in the running to win a $50 museum store voucher. So, get in there. Museum Victoria has been collecting objects related to health and medicine for over 100 years, including objects and stories related to Victorian experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's fantastic to see them now bring this together, industry, design, education, and public audiences in support of MedTech as a key growth area within Victoria. So with that, I think the next in the series is one on the genetic rescue of our fantastic beasts, Wednesday the 19th of July at Melbourne Museum. So hope to see you there. And with that, thank you very much. That concludes the event.
The Museums Victoria Research Institute
is reimagining research,
drawing on First Peoples and other knowledge systems
to expand our understanding
of our rapidly changing world.
We're seeking your support to help make an impact,
conserving Victoria's most vulnerable native animals using cutting-edge cryopreservation technology,
Working with regional communities to lead innovative citizen science projects,
to proactively connect the First Peoples' cultural inheritance, which is in our care, with the people and country it belongs to. Donate today and make your impact. Please.